Hello and welcome to the revision session on the Civil War. We're going to have a look at the causes of the Civil War, stuff that we've gone over, stuff that you do have in your book, but I'm going to talk about some of the main points. Now, the first big reason for the Civil War were the differences between the North and the South based on their economies. So the Northern economy was all about what?
Industrialization.
Industry, good. What else?
The South.
No, North. So the North was all about industry, cities, urbanization, manufacturing, basically making stuff. The factories of the United States were mostly in the North. The North carried a lot of the power, and it had a lot of the money as well. Now, did that economy suit slavery?
No.
Definitely not, no. Slaves were not suited to the Northern economy. So the North basically did not use slaves, not in the same way that the South did. So what was so different about the Southern economy? Yeah, Don?
They were more of the farming.
Yeah, it was all about farming and agriculture. There were lots of wide open spaces. There was a lack of urbanization. There were cities in the South, but not as many as in the North. And as such, slavery suited that economic system. You don't need to train slaves in the same way as if they were working in the factory. You could put a slave in the cotton field and say, look, pick that cotton. So yes, slaves suited the Southern system. And this had been going on for a long, long time. The North and the South, they weren't fighting over this, but this issue of slavery definitely divided them. And when we're thinking about the causes of the Civil War, we're thinking about what pushed the South towards secession, where they decide to leave the United States of America. Well, this isn't necessarily pushing the South away, but it is illustrating that divide based on slavery. So the next long-term cause, Dom and Ethan, we both did this in class, the next long-term cause of the Civil War was the... No, that's the Indians, okay, Civil War. Not quite yet. You're right in everything you're saying, but... No, that's the Indian Wars. The Treaty of Fort Laramie is to do with the Indian Wars and not the Civil War. The next cause of the Civil War, and this is one of the long-term causes, is the abolitionists. These are the people that campaigned to end slavery. How do the South feel about people like Harriet Tubman and John Brown?
They don't like them.
No, they don't like them.
Oh, threatened.
Threatened, absolutely, because these individuals, these abolitionists, are doing something. They're campaigning to end slavery as a way of life. Let's say that we all live in the South and our lives revolve around slavery in some way. Slavery is putting food on my table. It's allowing me to clothe my children. And these people here are trying to end slavery. So you can understand why the South hated the abolitionists so much. People like Harriet Tubman and John Brown, two good examples there. Now, the more active the abolitionists were, the more that the South felt threatened, that their way of life was under threat. And it's definitely a reason that pushed the South towards secession, that idea of leaving the United States of America. And that's what caused the Civil War. So the abolitionists, don't write too much. You've got all of this in your books at home. It's just a chance to talk about it again. The more we talk about this, the more you are going to remember it. So there were two long-term causes of the Civil War. Those ideas have been rattling around for a while and somewhat upsetting the South. What we're going to move on to now are the medium-term causes of the Civil War. And I would argue these were much more important. These examples start to shed light on why the South and the North fell out so much. So the first example that we're going to use is the 1820 Missouri Compromise. Now, let's have a look at my map. It's great. There it is. Who wanted to join the Union as a slave state? Missouri. Missouri wanted to join as a slave state. There's Missouri just there, and the O just above the red line in the middle. Now, the North weren't happy about that, because it would upset the balance of something. What would it upset the balance of? Exactly that. There were 14 slave states versus 14 free states. Everything was equal. If Missouri enters as a slave state, that gives the South a 15 So a 14 state in the North advantage. That means the South could vote for anything they wanted, and as long as they all voted together, they would get their way. So the North was definitely not going to allow Missouri to join as a slave state until a free state joined in the North. What was the free state? Yeah, read time on top right-hand corner, begins with an M as well. Missouri and Lions have it.
Maine.
Maine. You're very close, Tom. Yeah, Maine, up in the north, top right-hand corner of the map. See it there. Maine joined as a free state. Missouri joined as a slave state. And we had balance again. 15 slave states versus 15 free states. 1 second. The North took this, though, to the next stage. And this is what really angered the South. Because what did the North draw across America? Yeah, an imaginary line. And it became known as the Missouri Compromise line. And what it stated, this compromise, what it stated was that there were to be no slave states north of this line. So what does it look like the North is trying to do to slavery? Yeah, to ensure it doesn't spread throughout the United States. They're not trying to end it yet. There's no talk about ending slavery. They're just trying to create a system that ensures slavery does not spread into the northern states, and that's the Missouri Compromise line. Do you think that went down well with the South?
No.
No, it makes the South look like the bad guys, like the slavery is such an evil thing. We must stop it spreading across the United States, even though it's legal in the United States. So you can understand why the South got a little bit annoyed about the situation. Okay, what's the next? Go the right way. What's the next one? Of 1850. What did that? California, good man, okay? It's the 1850 California Compromise. If you have a look at that, the issue of slavery didn't crop up for about 30 years between 1820 and 1850. So it had been bubbling along in the background somewhat, but there had been no big arguments between the South and the North for about 50 years. But then we get a big issue in 1850 when California wants to join the Union as a slave state or a free state. Free state, absolutely. Now, if California joined as a free state, it upsets the balance again. It gives the South, or it puts the South, yeah, it gives the North an advantage of 16 states. Versus, I had to think about that to make sure I had it right. It would give the North an advantage of 16 states versus the South's 15. And obviously, the South was not happy about that. Should the North have allowed California to join? No, because it's unfair on the South. They wouldn't let Missouri join. But the North's a little bit of a bully in this relationship. It kind of does whatever it wants. And the North agree that it should become a state within the United States. And it's going to be allowed to join as a free state. You can see it there on the left-hand side. Purple to go with the northern purple colour. But it gives the North this advantage. So you can understand why the South is hopping mad about this. They're feeling hard done by, like they're being bullied. So the North say to the South, hey, look, don't worry. We will give you stuff to make you happy, okay? We will try to make you happy by the decisions that we take next. And what they said was, hey, look at this massive territory here, the New Mexico territory. What they're going to do is when enough people move there so it could become a state, they're going to be able to decide upon slavery for themselves. Based on where this new territory is, North and South, what do you think they would vote for? Slavery, absolutely. Judging by its neighbours, there's every chance that they would vote to be slave states. So that kept the South somewhat happy, just about. They also made stricter fugitive slave laws. Now the North were legally obliged to do what with runaway slaves? Send them back, absolutely. The North hated this because it made them feel that they were complicit in slavery. But this was all designed to make the South, or at least keep the South on side, because the South was so unhappy about California joining the Union and upsetting this balance. Now, if the North wanted to achieve something, as long as they all voted together, they would outvote the South. So potentially the North, when California joins, potentially the North could vote to end slavery. And this was the major worry in the South. Remember it all? Coming flooding back? Okay, and that was the second medium-term cause of the Civil War, the California Compromise when California joined as a free state. We're slowly pushing the South towards secession, where they decide to leave the Union. Right, next medium-term cause, the Kansas-Nebraska Act, 1854. Do you remember what this falling out was over? The building of something?
Railway.
The railway, is that what you're going to say?
Yeah.
Yeah, excellent, a railroad. We've got the Transcontinental Railroad being built from one side of America to the other, and wherever that railroad runs leads to kind of prosperity. If it's close to your town or close to your city, then it's going to encourage your city to grow. Now, understandably, both the North and the South wanted the railroad to run through their states. And the South spent 10 million securing land from Mexico to try to facilitate this. So the South really got going first. They put their plan into action way before the North to try to ensure that a railroad ran through southern states. Was the North ever going to allow that?
No.
No, remember, the North carries a bit of the power, most of the money, most of the influence, and as such, they behave very much like a bully. And the North say, no, it's not going to run through southern states, it's going to run through northern states. We need it. So the South were left hopping mad. Gone.
We're going to stay under the
Compromise. So the Kansas-Nebraska Act was all over this building of a railroad, and the North got its own way. The railroad was going to run through northern states. And you can understand why the South was so angry about that. But the North said, hey, look, South, don't worry. We're going to give you some stuff to keep you happy. Just like with the 1850 California Compromise, we'll do some stuff. We'll come to some conclusions and decisions that will make you happy. And one of the things that the North said could happen, and I'm going to move off this, Dom, now, but I am going to come back so you'll be able to see it again. Oh, now it's kicking into action. Why was that? Why did that happen? Working again. Right, anyway, here we go. Nebraska Act. So a railroad is going to run through northern states. And what that does, it potentially creates two new states, Kansas down there and Nebraska up at the top. And what the North say to the South, to keep them happy, is that when these areas become states, when enough people move to them that they can apply to become a state, they will be able to vote on the issue of slavery themselves. What is that called? Popular? I think you just wrote it down. Sovereignty. Popular sovereignty. Basically, the people of that area can decide upon their way of life. So the issue of slavery or being non-slave state, it's not going to be forced upon them. They can decide upon slavery for themselves, which potentially tears up what compromise? Yeah, the 1820 Missouri Compromise that said slavery was not allowed to pass north beyond Missouri Compromise line. Well, now the North is saying to keep the South happy, well, actually, we'll ignore that, and now slavery can potentially spread into northern states. It's not necessarily what the South wanted, but would the South be happy about that?
Yeah.
Yes, because they're always feeling restricted with this issue of slavery. It must be kept in the South, its own dirty little area, and not spread around the rest of the United States. Well, now, because of the Kansas-Nebraska Act, slavery could potentially spread into northern states. So this was just about enough to keep the South on side. But this led to something very problematic. And this is the first time it happened. It led to a situation known as Bleeding Kansas. Because the people of Kansas can now vote on the issue of slavery themselves, if more pro-slavers live in Kansas, then Kansas will be a slave state. If more anti-slavers live in Kansas, then Kansas will become a free state. So it's all about getting your people in there as quickly as possible. So the North, quite rightly and understandably, encouraged its settlers to move to Kansas. The South did the same, encouraged anybody that wanted to move to Kansas. So when there was a vote on the issue of slavery, their respective sides would win out. Now, that creates a situation that we never had before. We have Kansas, where we've got lots of pro-slavers and lots of anti-slavers all living in the same area. What does it lead to? And murder, absolutely. And this is why this is important. This is the first time that the North and the South have come to blows over the issue of slavery. Things are getting worse. Make sense?
Yeah.
Coming flooding back. So these are the medium-term causes. I definitely think these are more important. This is when the North and the South actually began to fall out with each other. The Missouri Compromise, the 1850 California Compromise, the Kansas-Nebraska Act, and then Bleeding Kansas that leads on from that. Happy with all?
Yeah.
Excellent. Right, let's move on. These are 3 extra ones, but I don't classify these anywhere near as important as the reasons that we've just spoken about. Now, Nat Turner's rebellion in 1831, Nat Turner was an ex-slave. He led a rebellion. It was quite a successful rebellion, and it encouraged other slaves to rebel. How does the South feel about slave rebellions? They don't like it, and the North isn't supporting them. Slavery is legal, yet in the North, you're actually encouraging slaves to rebel. The South's unhappy, feel like they're being persecuted for something which is legal in the United States. Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin. It was a book all about slavery and the horrors of slavery. It became a bestseller in the United States. So that means lots of people read it. And when they read it, what attitude or opinion did they have about slavery? Yeah, it was bad. They developed a negative attitude towards slavery. Understandable. So Harriet Beecher Stowe was hated by the South. They probably looked upon her as some sort of witch that needed to be hung, encouraging the slaves to escape and encouraging everybody to hate slavery. So this is just another reason that pushes the South towards secession. And then lastly, John Brown. John Brown was a good man, well done. John Brown was an abolitionist, and he led a raid on Harper's Ferry. Harper's Ferry was an arsenal where they kept guns. His plan was to steal lots of guns, give them to the slaves so they could kill their white masters.
Good plan in theory.
In theory, but it didn't go down well in the South. The South hated it. In the end, Brown was arrested on treason and actually executed. But again, we're moving towards a point where the South has simply had enough. And they say, enough's enough, we are off. And that leads me on to the short-term causes of the Civil War. These are the sparks that kicked it all off. And maybe the biggest spark was when President Lincoln, or rather Lincoln was elected as president on the 6th of November, 1860. What was the big issue with Lincoln?
He's a communist. He doesn't like slavery.
Yeah, absolutely. He spent his life as an abolitionist. He spoke very passionately about the horrors of slavery. But when he was elected, he didn't stand up and say, I'm going to ban slavery. He realized how important slavery was for the US economy, not just the economy, but for the USA in general. It's not what binded them together, but it was something which held the North and the South together. And he said, look, I'm not going to get rid of slavery because that would end so many people's ways of life. But that wasn't accepted. That people didn't believe his word. And the South saw the election of Lincoln as an attack on their way of life and potentially the end of their way of life.
I mean, to be fair to the South, Lincoln was saying stuff about how slavery was ugly.
Yeah, he was taught. The thing is, if we were Southerners, judging what Lincoln had been saying in the past and in the build-up to the election, I don't think we would have trusted him if he said, look, I'm not going to end slavery, don't panic. Well, you hate it so much, you speak so passionately about the horrors of slavery and how it does need to end in the United States. So it's understandable why the South saw this as kind of a final nail in the coffin. So Lincoln elected as president is one of those sparks which kicks off the war. And this is a spark which kickstarts the secession of the southern states. And on December 20th, 1860, South Carolina secedes from the United States. They basically say, look, we joined the United States of America voluntarily. We joined this union voluntarily. Now we want to leave. We should be allowed to leave voluntarily as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I totally understand their point of view and where they were coming from. But I also understand Lincoln's point of view because the United States was something much bigger. They'd worked hard to create this United States of America, this new country. They beat the British in the War of Independence, and they've been through a lot, and they've grown a lot. So Lincoln said this was too important to lose, and we are not going to allow states to leave the Union. And Lincoln was prepared to fight a war over it. So when South Carolina left, Lincoln simply said, no, I'm not accepting you have a right to leave the Union. When Lincoln stood his ground like that, 6 other southern states also leave the Union as well to show solidarity with South Carolina. And I know that says Caroline, it needs to say an A, autocorrect, I think. So South Carolina secedes from the Union. Lincoln basically declares war, saying you're not allowed to leave and I will fight a war to prevent you from leaving. And after that, 6 other southern states also leave the Union to show their support for South Carolina. Nothing really happens for a number of months. This happens in December, and there's been no fighting up until April the following year, April 1861. But then the South make a dramatic decision. The South decide to attack the North, the Union, at Fort Sumter. And this kicked off the war. As soon as this happened, all the other southern states also seceded. They left as well. And the Civil War was on.
Not all left, all border states stayed in the Union.
You are right, actually. There were 4 border states. You know them off the top of your head?
No.
No, neither do I. But you are right. Not all the southern states left, but pretty much all of them. If you wrote all of them on your exam, you'd be all right. So these are the causes of the Civil War: the the long term, the abolitionists, and the differences between the North and the South. We've got the medium-term causes: the Missouri Compromise, the California Compromise, the Kansas-Nebraska Act, and Bleeding Kansas. And then we've got the short-term causes of the Civil War: Lincoln being elected as president, leaving the Union, Lincoln declaring war, and then all the other states leaving as well. -4. Yes, those things have been bubbling along in the background for a long time. And I'm going to stop recording now, and then potentially start again. Where has it gone?
Make sure
Why is it? Where is it gone? Here we go, up there. Here we go. And stop recording.